Thank you. Well, it is it is great to be back in Portland. And I just want to point out, every time I come to Portland, it's like 80 degrees and sunny. I just want to make that point. I'm not saying that I'm the reason, but there does seem to be a correlation between. I love you back. Thank you. Thank you. A couple of people that I want to acknowledge because they're doing outstanding work. First of all, your excellent Governor, John Kitzhaber. He's making a difference. Former Governor, Barbara Roberts. We love Barbara. Secretary of State Kate Brown is here. Kate is making sure here in Oregon everybody gets a chance to vote. We like that in her. Mayor Sam Adams is here. I want to thank somebody who put so much work into this event, Terry Bean. Give Terry a big round of applause. And even if you are a Ducks fan, I want you to give a big round of applause to the best brother-in-law anybody could ever hope for, and an outstanding basketball coach of the Oregon State Beavers, Craig Robinson. So no offense, Ducks fans, but I got a root for family. All right. Now, if folks have chairs, feel free to sit down. If you don't, I see a few do. If not, just make sure to bend your legs so you don't faint. It is wonderful to be back in Portland. One of my favorite events ever was the rally we had by the water in Portland 4 years ago. It was a day just like today. It was just as pretty as can be, and there were folks out kayaking and out in boats, and you just could see as far as it was just beautiful, and the people could not have been warmer. And so I just want to thank all of you for being so welcoming. This is my last political campaign. No, I'm term limited. That's the way it works. And it got me thinking about some of my first political campaigns. When I was first running for the state Senate, and Craig will remember this because we'd have to go to Kinko's to print out flyers. And he'd be drafted along with Michelle and some friends, and we'd just go around neighborhoods and knocking on doors. And then later when I ran for the United States Senate, which was a loftier office, obviously, but I didn't have a loftier infrastructure around me. So we didn't have Marine One. We did not have Air Force One. I drove myself in my car, usually with one staff person. And back then, young people, you will not remember this, but there were these things called maps because we did not have GPS. They were on paper, and you'd have to fold them. You'd unfold them, and then trying to fold them back was really difficult. And I'd get lost because Illinois is a big state, and I'd take the wrong turn and wind up in the wrong town. And when I finally got to the event, I'd have to look for my own parking spot, and you'd end up being late, and sometimes it'd be raining, and you had to see if you could find the umbrella somewhere in the back with all the junk that was there. But I have such fond memories of those campaigns because when I travel throughout Illinois, you'd go to inner cities, you'd go to rural, small farm towns, you'd go to suburbs. You'd meet folks from every walk of life, every race, every faith, every background, every income level. What I'd hear are stories that reminded me of my own family stories. So I'd see a retired veteran, and he'd remind me of my grandfather. And I'd think back about my grandfather fighting in World War II in Patton's Army, and while my grandmother was working on a bomber assembly line, and how when he came back, he was able to go to college on the GI Bill. And my grandparents were able to buy their first home with the help of an FHA loan. And I think about the incredible journey that they had traveled because they were lucky enough to live here in America. And I'd meet a working couple, and I'd think about Craig and Michelle's parents. You know, their dad, by the time I met him, could barely walk because he had MS. He had to use 2 canes. And he'd have to wake up an hour earlier than everybody else just to get dressed to make sure that he punched the clock on time. He worked blue-collar job at the water filtration plant in Chicago, and Craig and Michelle's mom worked as a secretary, but they had such strong values and such love for their family and such a sense of responsibility that they were able to give their kids everything they needed to thrive and succeed. And I think back to what an incredible country it was where Craig's mom and dad would be able to watch him succeed and Michelle become the First Lady of the United States eventually. Now I meet a single mom, and I think about my own mom. My dad left before I even knew him, and so she had to raise me and my sister and work and go to school at the same time. But because she was able to get grants and scholarships, she was able not only to get a great education herself and ultimately help women around the world develop themselves, but she was also able to give me and my sister this incredible education and these incredible opportunities. And so everywhere I'd go around Illinois, and eventually everywhere I went as a presidential candidate, what I consistently see is this running thread, this core theme, this basic bargain that is at the heart of this country. And it can be described very simply. It's that here in America, no matter what you look like, no matter where you come from, no matter what your last name is, no matter where you worship, here in America, if you're willing to work hard, you can make it. Here in America, if you are acting responsibly, you can succeed. Here in America, this basic notion that if you're willing to make an effort, you can find a job that pays a living wage and allows you to support a family. That you can get a home that you can call your own, that you can have the security that if somebody in your family gets sick, you won't go bankrupt, that you can send your kids to a good school, you can retire with some dignity and respect, and that your kids can do better than you ever imagined. That's what America's about. That's what has made us the envy of the world. This idea that here you can make it, and that everybody gets a fair shot, and that everybody does their fair share, and everybody's playing by the same set of rules. That's what built the greatest middle class in the history of the world. That's what made us an economic superpower. And I'm here today for the same reason that I came 4 years ago. When I ran in 2008, it was because that basic bargain, that basic notion that you can make it here if you try, that had started to slip away from more and more people. We had gone through a decade in which people were working harder but making less money, while the costs of everything from college education to health care were going up. We had fought 2 wars on a credit card. We'd taken a surplus, and because of tax cuts that weren't paid for, we had turned them into deficits. And it all culminated in incredible recklessness on Wall Street that resulted in the worst financial crisis and economic crisis in our history. And so, in an environment in which jobs and factories were being shipped overseas and folks at the top were doing very well while middle-class families were struggling, we came together saying that, yes, it would take more than 1 year or one term or maybe even one president to turn this thing around, but we were going to fight for the kinds of changes that would ensure we got back to that basic American premise, that basic idea that if you work hard in this country, you can make it. Now, this crisis has been deeper and more brutal than I think anybody back then anticipated. But over the last 3.5 years, everything I've done, everything my administration's done, has stayed focused on that goal. And so where we were losing 800,000 jobs a month when I was sworn to office, we've been creating jobs now for almost 3 years straight. 4.5 million new jobs. 500,000 in manufacturing. The fastest manufacturing growth since the 1990s. We've helped to make sure that small businesses were able to survive this brutal recession and invested in them. And so we've made progress, but we still have millions of folks who are out of work and homes that are underwater. So we've got a lot more work to do. Understanding all that, though, when I hear cynics say that or suggest that our best days are behind us, I've got to tell them, you haven't witnessed the character of the American people. One of the great privileges of being president is you meet people all across the country, just like I used to meet folks all across Illinois, and when you see the character and the grit and the determination of the American people, you can't help but be optimistic. Anybody who thinks that our best days are behind us, they haven't met the small business owners in Minnesota who chose to sacrifice some of their own perks and pay just to avoid laying off a single worker during the recession. They haven't been to auto plants in Michigan or Ohio that were never supposed to build another car again and now can't build them fast enough. The cynics, they must not have met the workers that I meet. A factory worker in her 50s in North Carolina who decided that when the furniture industry left town, she'd get her degree in biotechnology from the local community college. She said not just to get a job of the future, but also to show her kids that in this country, we don't give up. If we get knocked down, we pick ourselves back up. And we can succeed and achieve our dreams. So there are no quick fixes or easy solutions to some of the challenges we face. They've built up over decades, and we have begun to move this country in the right direction. But I have no doubt that we've got the capacity to meet every single one of these challenges. We've got the best workers in the world and the best entrepreneurs. We've got the best scientists and the best researchers, the best colleges and the best universities. We've got the greatest diversity of talent and ingenuity that's coming from all around the globe, every corner. And no matter what the naysayers may tell us, there's not a country on earth that wouldn't trade places gladly with the United States of America. So what's standing in our way for all the progress we've made, what's preventing us from making even more progress, is politics. It's what's going on in Washington. It is a stalemate in which one side has an uncompromising view that the only path forward is to go back to the stuff that didn't work before, the same top-down economics that got us into this mess in the first place. I disagree with them. I think they are wrong. At stake in this election are two fundamentally different visions about how we move this country forward. They believe in top-down economics. I believe in middle-out economics. I believe in bottom-up economics. I believe we're all in this together. That's what I'm fighting for, and that's why I'm running for a second term as President of the United States of America. Let me give you a few examples of the choice, because all of you are going to ultimately be the ones who break this stalemate. Tomorrow, the Senate is going to vote on a bill that says that if you earn less than $250,000 a year, your taxes will not go up next year by a single dime. Now, members of both parties say that they agree this should happen so that our families and our businesses have a little more security and certainty going forward, which would be good for the economy. But, of course, we are dealing in Washington, the only place where people agree on something and still can't get it done. So Republicans in Congress, they've decided, apparently, that they're not going to let this bill pass, despite the fact that 98% of Americans make $250,000 a year or less. So we could provide 98% of Americans certainty that their taxes would not go up, despite the fact that this would be good for the economy and investment climate. They've decided to hold middle-class tax cuts hostage until we also agree to spend another $1 trillion on tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, folks who don't need tax breaks, and frankly, many of them aren't even asking for them. Now, Governor Romney doesn't just approve of this strategy, he wants to import this into the White House. His economic plan is, and this is the entire gist of his economic plan, is to cut more taxes for the most wealthy Americans, to cut more regulations for banks and corporations, including regulations we just put in place in response to the worst financial crisis we've had in our lifetimes, to cut more investments in things like education and research, all with the hopes that somehow this is going to create more jobs and prosperity. That's what Mitt Romney believes. That's what his allies in Congress believe. Now, there's one problem with that. It is an economic theory. The hitch is that we tried this. As Bill Clinton put it a couple weeks ago, this is exactly what was done before I took office, except on steroids. And it didn't work. So it's not what you believe will grow the economy. It's not what I believe will grow the economy. It's not what most Americans, regardless of party, believe will grow the economy. This country was not built that way, from the top down. It was built from the middle out. It was built from the bottom up. It was built because incredible self-reliance and rugged individualism and entrepreneurship and risk-taking was rewarded. And it was built because we invested in great schools and great universities. And we put rules of the road in place to make sure that everybody was being treated fairly. That's how we became the most prosperous nation on earth. And that's why I'm running for a second term as President of the United States, to go back to what works.